Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Hadirin yang dihormati sekalian, sebentar sahaja lagi majlis akan dimulakan. Hadirin diingatkan untuk mendaftarkan diri di Google Form yang telah disediakan yang akan diberikan di chat box pada akhir majlis. Sebelum majlis bermula, eloklah kita menyediakan buku nota dan pen bagi mencatat ilmu-ilmu yang akan diperoleh pada malam ini. Terima kasih. Baiklah, untuk peserta yang baru masuk, hadirin yang dihormati, sebentar sahaja lagi majlis akan dimulakan. Hadirin diingatkan untuk mendaftarkan diri di Google Form yang telah disediakan yang akan diberikan di ruangan komen pada akhir majlis. Sebelum majlis bermula, eloklah kita menyediakan buku nota dan pen bagi mencatat segala ilmu yang akan diperoleh pada malam ini. Terima kasih. Baiklah hadirin sekalian, kita masih lagi menunggu speaker kita untuk masuk, jadi harap para hadirin bersabar. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera kepada para hadirin sekalian. Alhamdulillah, syukur kita terhadap ilahi kerana pada malam ini kita telah dipertemukan dalam sebuah ceramah ilmiah yang bagi saya cukup menarik, iaitu ceramah kesihatan mental. Bagi pihak majlis, kami ingin mengucapkan selamat datang dan setinggi-tinggi perhargaan diucapkan kepada Madam Siti Nursadrina binti Muhammad Isa yang sudi bersama-sama kita pada malam ini. Seterusnya, Wakil Majlis Perhubungan Kampus PKPIM Pusat, Wakil Angkatan Belia Islam ABIM Negeri Pahang dan Wakil Ikatan Pelajar Islam Pahang. Dan akhir sekali, para penonton yang sudi bersama-sama kita pada malam ini. Baiklah para hadirin, tajuk kita pada malam ini ialah Trap of Burnout and Minimizing Suicidal Thoughts. Baiklah, sebelum kita memulakan majlis, bagi memberkati majlis ilmu kita pada hari ini, marilah sama-sama kita mengaminkan bacaan doa yang akan dipimpin oleh saudara Muhammad Arif Izzuddin bin Muhammad Asri. Dipersilakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Al-Fatihah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Ya Allah, ya fa'al lima yurid. Oh Allah, we express our gratitude to you for allowing us to attend this event on this auspicious day. Oh Allah, we ask you for the safety of our religion and the welfare of our body. Oh Allah, Lord of the implementing authority, make the days that we have gone through, starting with your mercy, continue with your blessing and righteous guidance, ended with thy forgiveness. Make the days that we have gone through spent in your obedience, adorn us with adornment of the righteous and clothe us with the ornament of the pious in spreading good behavior. Lowering the wing of humility, beauty of conduct, advancing towards excellence, avoiding condemnation, being gracious to the undeserving, speaking through the bitter. Ya Allah, Ya Muhaimin, Ya Aziz, Ya Jabbar, let our effort as a means to enlighten and convince ourselves that personal safety of either order or inner is a prerequisite for achieving happiness and excellence in various fields. O Allah, grant us faith and strength in order to face the challenges of life during these needy yet troubling times and in the face of life in this new norm. Ya Allah, Ya Farij al-Ham, Ya Kashif al-Gham, Ya Man li'abdihi yaghfiru wa yarham. O Allah, show us guidance and adjust our paths and ways to achieve happiness and glory. Let us listen to people who like the good things. Let us avoid doing the bad and evil things. O Allah, bless our life in this gathering and prevent us from harm and unfortunate events. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Amin, amin, ya Rabbal Alamin. Terima kasih buat saudara Arif Izzuddin atas bacaan doa itu tadi. Para hadirin sekalian, tak kenal maka tak cinta. Jadi gembira untuk saya memperkenalkan speaker kita pada malam ini yang cukup berpengalaman dan berpengetahuan dalam tentang tajuk kita pada malam ini. Beliau merupakan Profesor Madya Muhammad Muhsin bin Ahmad Zahari, seorang pakar perunding kanan Sekretari Pusat Perubatan Universiti Malaya, berkelulusan Doktor Perubatan dari University College Dublin, Ireland. Bukan biasa-biasa ya speaker kita pada malam ni. Dan seterusnya beliau juga merupakan Timbalan Pengarah Pusat Kajian Sains Ketagihan Dadah Universiti Malaya. Sebelum kita bermula, suka untuk saya ingatkan anda untuk bersama-sama kami sehingga ke akhir majlis kerana kami akan mengadakan quiz session dan hadiah berbentuk wang tunai menanti anda. Baiklah, tanpa membuang masa, saya ingin mempersilakan speaker kita pada malam ini, Prof. Dr. Muhammad Muhsin bin Ahmad Sahari, untuk menyampaikan ceramah kesihatan mental yang bertajuk Trap of Burnout and Minimizing Suicidal Talks. Dipersilakan.
Thank you very much to the chairperson. Apa ni, nama Nek Fatin ya, Nek Fatin Hazira. Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm very happy to be invited by Persatuan Kebangsaan Pelajar Islam Malaysia, right? For Center Foundation Studies in IUM. Okay, so yeah. So basically, I try to make tonight, I mean, as usual, I'm a lecturer in psychological medicine or in psychiatry. Lucky or not, when I talk to students, something like become formal, even though I try to make it informal, okay? I hope, even though it's, I have a slide and probably something look like formal, but I think I would like, if you have any issue or you want clarification, you can ask questions, okay? Otherwise, it will be a very hard Sunday night, right? Tomorrow is a Monday blues, right? So it's very good for the organizer to organize on the Sunday night. So at least preparing your mental health for the next week. Okay, I'm a psychiatrist working in University Melayu Medical Center. As introduced just now, my interest primarily on my research mostly confined in the prison, so I'm more like toward custodial mental health, we call it. Okay, custodial. That means somebody been put into the prison or something like that. And also on the top of that, I'm doing a lot of addiction-related research as well. So that's why I'm the Deputy Director of the University Melayu Center of Addiction Sciences. So tonight, I'm talking about burnout. Then I will touch later on the suicidal issues, because this is quite important, especially for the university student. Not only university student, I think the data showed that lately, when you, late adolescent to a young adults, the rate of suicide rate in Malaysia recently showed quite a high prevalence. Okay, so I'm going to share my slide here. Okay. So you can see my slide now, right? Coming up.
Yes, I can see.
Okay. All right. So you can see right now, okay, the slide. Can you see my face?
Yes, sir.
Because I cannot see your face, I only see the slide. This is always a problem because I'm using slideshow. So anyway, if you have any things, I don't mind for you to interrupt, okay? I will try to talk for about slightly more than 1 hour. Then after that, we have Q&A sessions. So when talking about burnout, before I go in depth to a burnout, I think it's important to understand what is the situation in our country, looking at the population in general. So I'm looking here at the National Health Morbidity Survey. This is a research or the survey done by the Ministry of Health. After every 5 years, they do this survey. So like in 1996, it showed that around 10.7% have mental health problem among Malaysian population. 2006, 11%, and 2015, 29%, almost 30%, meaning 1/3 of populations, 30%, 1/3 of the population is suspected having mental health problem. So this is very important fact anyway. So if 1/3 of 30 millions is about 1/3 of 30 millions, meaning probably 10 millions or slightly less, because this is talking about 16 and above. So Malaysian population, we have I think around 20% is below 18, when talking about only 18, if I'm not mistaken, about 18, 20%, will be add up after those who can vote. I mean, this is why I'm trying to relate this figure. So I think around slightly less than 10 million people having mental health problems. So this is important fact to be acknowledged, especially you as a student, probably student leader in this group, those who listen here. So you should be aware that our population heading toward, many people having affected by mental health. And that figure even before the COVID, talking about COVID, is the figure much higher. Okay, so this is another from WHO. We can see here, you can see in 2004, the depressive disorder, you can see number 3 in 2004 as a burden of disease. However, it's estimated that in 2030, depressive disorder become burden number 1. So I hope you can follow this what they call understanding, because in medicine, 2 main outcome. One is death, which is mortality. Another one is morbidity. That means causing disability. Like, as a student, perhaps you cannot follow, you withdraw from your study. Okay.
Prof, sorry.
Yes.
Are you scroll the slide?
Yes, I'm moving the slide. Now slide number 3.
Because I can see the movement of the slide.
You cannot see. You can see
Yes,
the first one only.
Yes.
Okay. Then so now.
Okay. Now I see.
Now, can you see?
Yes, Prof.
All right. Is it big enough for you to see? Because I'm afraid it is too small.
Yeah, I think it's too small.
Small, right?
Yeah.
Now? Can you see the disorder displayed there? 2004, for example, depressive disorder is number 3. Can you see or cannot see?
Maybe a little bit, Prof.
A little bit. Maybe I should enlarge this.
Okay, Prof.
Okay, now you can see, yeah? I hope.
Thank you, Prof.
So you can see 2004 and 2030 about depressive disorder is become a number 1 as a burden of disease. That means the illness affecting the people in terms of their work. If student probably ability to follow your education, your academic achievement all been affected. So this is the morbidity survey, I would say. So beside this, you can see here also like road traffic accident, just for your interest, I want to show here. So cardiovascular disease means the heart disease, become top 5, the COPD means the asthma, for medical student, you should know lah. I think, I'm not sure how many of you actually medicals or going to be medical student. Yeah, foundation, right?
Yes, Prof.
So those who are going to do medicine should know this. but for those who are not doing medicine, this is your general knowledge, I would say. So this is mental health issue, you know. It is important to be recognized. So now I'm talking about because the burnout, you know, issue of burnout is closely related to mental health issue, because in mental health there's a lot of branches, you know. For example, someone have stress, control of stress, anxiety, depressed. I don't want to talk about somebody like schizophrenia. So, okay, this is now we are talking about burnout. Because I think all of you, most of you actually students, very closely related this issue of burnout. Okay, so burnout basically a special type of work-related stress. So work meaning for student is considered work as well. So as a student, you stress out with your study. You know, this is one of the common thing that can happen to anyone. And a psychological syndrome emerging as a prolonged response to a chronic interpersonal stressor on the job. So chronic interpersonal. Chronic means he's been going on for a long time usually. So burnout cannot exist after one day of things. You know, you do something, you do assignment one day, or you just enter the college for 1 month, you know. So it cannot be related in that circumstances. Usually it's talking about continuous or chronic nature in nature, and also interpersonal. So interpersonal referring to that you react with another person, you know. So it's not only you as a alone, but when you interact with people. So this is the manifestations of burnout start coming in. Okay, so prolong and more than one people. Okay, and there's a stress related to that, you know. So if you, there must be a stress, there must be another person, there must be not only short time, it's long time. So it is a psychological syndrome. So actually predominantly you can feel it, you know, because it's in the emotion psychologically, and a state of physical and emotional exhaustions. That means sound like fatigue, you know, tiredness, you know. Exhaustion means that also involve a sense of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. Okay. Then when talking about burnout, there are three dimensions to it, to divide to complete the syndrome. So first, it must be overwhelming exhaustions or fatigue. So you must feel that feeling, you know, like feeling cannot go on further. Example, you know, or you feel you disengage already. I will describe this is quite detailed afterward, basically what it means by overwhelming exhaustion and fatigue. And secondly, cynicism or detachment. So cynicism is you're referring to you see all negative of what you are doing. Okay, you cannot see the positive. So everything you finding things about what you are doing all mostly negative. That's what it means by cynicism. And detachment. So you cannot engage from your what they call tasks, your activities. You know, you feel like you can't appreciate what you are doing. And of course, thirdly, a sense of ineffectiveness. So lack of accomplishment. So basically, you're probably doing something good, but you feel it's a fail. It's a failure. You know, you feel like you probably expect you can do better, but what you achieve much less than your expectations. So, but this is important thing about the third one. Sometimes you probably have already achieved the standard of other people who also do the same thing, but the only thing you feel it is not adequate. Okay, so this is another issue, probably something to do with your personality, you know, like somebody who perfectionist, want to do much better in performing their tasks. So that's perhaps make you feel you didn't perform as what you should be. So this is a graph showing is a descriptions of your psychological response. So your ability to perform and the demands, you know. So if overall, I want to show you actually we need some stress. You know, the demands here means stress. So you must have stress. If you know stress, you probably underperform. You will heading up, you know, like very boredom, you know, what you are doing, or your under involvements, you know, because no pressure, no stress. So it must be go to the middle. So you will perform optimum. But if the stress is too much, then of course it will be detrimental again, you know. You feel indecisive, you feel irritable, you become anxious, confused. Of course, the one spectrum here, burnout. If the stress is prolonged, as I mentioned, and also too much for you to bear beyond your capability, for example. So when talking about burnout, again, you know, there are few ways looking at the burnout. First, from social perspective, you know, when talking about burnout, if you remember the three dimension I mentioned earlier, one of them is interpersonal relationship. So we're talking about interpersonal relations, meaning that how people perceive and respond to others, you know, how we interact. So it cannot be if you want alone, you develop what they call burnout. Usually no. Usually you interact with people. From the lecturers, for example, I'm talking you've been given assignment one after another, you know, so something like that also can cause stress and burnout. This included detached concern, so dehumanizations in self-defense, and also attribution processes. And when talking about social perspective, it's also related to concept of motivations and emotion, especially coping with emotional arousal. So how you motivate yourself, you know, how people around you as a driven factor for you to achieve in your life. This is somehow important. That's why that's that I would say in the positive connotations, you know, because we're talking about burnout, also interpersonal relationship, but it is in a negative way. But when talking about motivation, also sometimes we need extrinsic motivation, meaning from outside to make you move further, and hopefully this what they call the positive motivation will override the negative interpersonal issue, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, this is more that we always deal in the hospital, for example, from the clinical perspective. So it is dealt with the motivation and emotion, but frame this more in terms of psychological disorders, so such as depression. So what it tried to say here, burnout sometimes is mimic to the depressive disorder. So some similarity, for example, affecting sleep. For example, when you are in the burnout, your sleep can be affected. Your concentration also can be affected. So all this actually overlap with the depressive symptom or disorder. Then also, more interestingly, when talking about in the organization, so as a student or at the workplace, for example, so we call it industrial organizational psychology. So when you interact with another person, your colleague at work, sometimes, you know, when you work, when you go to I mean, student probably not so much, but you work, you have a responsibility, and you've been given one after another responsibility to complete. So this is also can result in burnout, and that's a form of job stress as well, and focusing more on organizational context, because when we live as a student or as in the as responsibility person at workplace, you know, like it or not, we have to interact. We have working colleagues and so on. So this is what we call in the bigger picture as an organizational behavior. That means interaction between people in that particular organization, for example, at work. And the exhaustion dimensions was also described as wearing out, feeling loss of energy, depletions, debilitations, and fatigues. Okay. And the cynicism dimension was originally called depersonalization. When depersonalization happened, this is not only burnt out, but generally in psychiatric context, you feel the surrounding is different. You feel, you detach from the environment. The example of depersonalization also, you perhaps, you know, sometimes you close to your sibling, but at one time you feel there's a, I would say, like a gap, you know, when you communicate, you know, when you interact socially with your sibling, for example, not as close as usual. So this is what it means by depersonalizations. Okay, but was also described as a negative or inappropriate attitude to it. I'm talking about work, clients, you know, irritability, loss of idealism, you know, that means you don't hold to your principle anymore, and also withdrawal from social, you know, not interacting with people. And the efficacy dimension was originally called reduced personal accomplishment. So this is another way looking at burnout, you know, when you feel your, as I touched a bit earlier, you know, when talking, you feel like you are not accomplished as what you should be, okay? And was also described as reduced productivity, capability, morale is low. That means no desire to move on in your organizations, in your work, or as a student, you feel like you stuck already, you know, you cannot move further in your commitment, and inability to cope as well with that stress. So when we're talking about work overload, by depleting the capacity of people to meet the demands of the job. So that means the demand is too big. If you remember the graph just now that I showed earlier, so the demand is so huge, but your ability to fulfill the demand probably not high. Okay, so it will leave you with the work overload, and subsequently, if it's a prolonged, it is interpersonal with another person, it become burnout. Okay, this is try to simplify the meaning of burnout. When this kind of overload is a chronic job condition, there's a little opportunity to rest, recover, and restore your balance. You know, of course, when you have so many assignments, when you're heading for exam, for example, okay, that's good. I mean, before exam, perhaps the last 6 weeks before exam, you all out. You know, you detach from other things. Probably lack of opportunity to rest, to recover, or to restore your balance. You know, healthy living. You know, so that's by right should not be that way, you know, because I think it is important for you to ensure your what you call work-life balance is there. So there's, for example, evidence showed that, you know, exercise would do good to anyone, you know, including in your case like a student. I always advise people to do exercise, because exercise is like I use the word buffer, you know. build up your resilience, your strength. Resilience here meaning, you know, if you have stress, you still able to bargain it. Bargain means, you know, you can compensate your stress. Okay, that's most important. So healthy lifestyle, for example, one of the element is exercise, very important. I always also advise people in the case of sleep, make sure your sleep is adequate. You know, we always take for granted for our sleep, but sleep is what your biology want. You know, like eating, we eat for granted, we take for granted as well. You know, we just eat, but unfortunately sometimes we eat fast food. You know, not healthy, salt rich food, you know, or oil rich food, or eat middle of night, late night, especially like your case lah, like student, you know, study, you know, you get bored, then you apa, minum teh tarik lah malam-malam kan, selalu habit. Not a good habit lah. I mean, if you can avoid, but if you cannot, sometimes the effect later on, you know, after you finish your study, you know, when you start working, you start develop, for example, in the case of, you know, obesity, you know, you predispose yourself to diabetes, you know, type 2 diabetes. You know, medical student will know this. So sorry, I have the assumption that some of you medical students, that's why when I heard student foundation, I will think about some of you might understand more in depth. So that's workload. Secondly, workload is important. I hope you remember. Then lack of control, sense of control is important. So you're able to control your work, execute your work within your what they call stipulated time. You know, you have to meet deadline. You know, submitting assignment. Don't procrastinate. You know, tak tangguh-tangguh. Because sometimes our attitude is a problem. So sense of control is important on the top of workload. Sometimes people have a big workload, you know, because they enjoy what they are doing, so they keep taking just the workload from your boss when you're working. You know, sometimes your boss see you can do things, can perform, they just give one after another. But have to make sure at a certain point, make sure you're able to control, to perform the job effectively, meeting the deadline. Okay, something like that. So if you have you deal with the lack of control, then there's another risk for burnout. So if you remember, workload, lack of control, the third one is about rewards. Okay, reward is important to motivate someone, to move someone, you know. So in the psychological word here, the power of reinforcement to shape people behavior. Insufficient recognition and reward, whether financially reward, you know, social reward, will increase people vulnerability to burnout. So if you're a leader or you're working, you become a boss at one time in the future, so make sure this element of rewards should be there. Okay, because without reward, you know, insufficient reward means you like devalue both works and the workers. You know, you're not showing the appreciations. So and in contrast, consistency in rewards dimension, that means you giving rewards in the regular basis to your what they call people work under you, or if you are in the what they call like student among students, you know, you celebrate things between among students, you know, if you achieve success, you know. So consistency in reward between the person and the job means that there are both material reward and opportunity for the intrinsic satisfaction. So basically, a sense of satisfied, self-satisfaction is important here. And the next element when talking about burnout is about community engagement. So the ongoing relationship that employee have with other people on the job. So again, it's about interpersonal relationship again, okay? When these relationships are characterized by lack of support and trust and by unresolved conflict, meaning, your work conflict, non-stop conflict at your workplace, one after another. After one thing settle, another things prop up. So this will make the situation, the community at work become haphazard, not a safe situation. Again, not you go to work or you go as a student to that particular place and you are feeling not safe continuously, it will contribute to feeling of burnout again, okay? So in contrary, when these job related relationships are working well, there's a great deal of social support. Employees have effective means of working out disagreement. So in the workplace, for example, you have disagreement, misunderstanding, there's a mechanism, for example, established. That will be good, what they call, organization that you are in at that time. And they are more likely to experience job engagement. So people will engage with their job. Okay, this is next element when talking about burnout. It's about feeling you being treated fairnessly. You feel you've been being fair. People has treated you fair. So sometimes you work so hard, you try to achieve something, but you are not treated equally in that particular group. So the emerges of feeling inequality, and the lack of social justice. So this is when talking about fairness to prevent burnout. The extent to which the decisions at work are perceived as being fair and equitable, and people use the quality of the procedures and their own treatment during the decision-making process. So, and as an index, their place in the community. So, in other words, here referring to you feel you are in that particular environment. So you are a student, you feel the presence there. If your work, you are the sense of belonging to that particular workplace. Okay, when they are making decision making, you also involve equally in that decision making. Okay, so this is what it means here, involving everyone to participate. And cynicism, anger, hostility, not healthy. So if the working environment as a student, they are always been hostile, shouting to each other, for example, very what they call hostile environment, that's not healthy and make it prone to a burnout. So the next element is values. Okay, so this is about how the organization holding certain principle in dealing with people. So for example, the values being upheld is for if you this is what I'm talking working environment. If you work, you achieve good, better, you entitled for promotion, for example. So this is if the organization have that kind of what they call outlook to the employee, that would feel better. As well as student, So the lecturer tak boleh pilih kasih lah. Siapa yang bagus, dia akan dapat markah lagi bagus lah kan. Bukan sebab dia baik dengan lecturer. Macam tu. So what I'm trying to say here, that particular values is important, for example. Okay, so the right values in that organization will help or to prevent from burnout. Okay, so values, if you remember already, like 5, 6 element already I mentioned. Okay. So what possible cause of burnout? Okay. So now you don't have to worry because some of the statement I'm going to say probably the repetitions, only the different perspectives. So possible causes of burnout, lack of control, I already mentioned just now earlier. And secondly, unclear expectation in the job, for example. The target of the work, the expectation from the your employer keep changing, without fixing what's the aim, in what they call in your performance. This is quite common. Sometimes when talking about the expectations, what they call key performance index. Every year we have to target certain level of achievement. I give example like in the university when we work, we have to get a grant for research, for example. So there's sometimes the university put a high bar. You have to achieve 100,000 worth of research grant. So it's not easy to achieve this sometimes because we are competing between university, between lecturers, ourselves, so many levels. And then suddenly, while we try to achieve that, the change, okay, as a lecturer, we have to achieve this thing, publication, for example. So the goal keep changing. I'm sharing the university experience. So other people also in at work also perhaps have certain expectation as well in their job, and this thing can change according to your boss, according to the employer. This is another possible cause, dysfunctional workplace dynamic. What is referring here, dynamic usually in your relationship, your relationship with your friends. Of course, sometimes another friends influence more than you, and you probably good at academic, that friend probably not good at academic, dia pandai bodek je, macam itulah contoh dia kan. Jadi overall picture here, even though there's some negative, there's some good here, but it is balanced out. If you can see, this is about life anyway. No perfect, no so-called perfect living, idealistic living, but in life sometimes the dynamic is more important, meaning it is balanced out. So what you mentioned here, for example, perhaps you work with an office bully, okay, the people who you work with is like to bully people, or you feel undermined by your colleagues, or your boss micromanage your work. That means micromanage, every meticulous detail your boss want to see, So that can be very stressful. And it can result to imbalance work balance as well. Why I say when you are so detailed, your boss examine your work so detailed, very meticulous, should another way they are actually or not, as they use the word mistrust, but the trust is not there. That's why somebody might be examining your works to extreme detail. Okay, next is extreme of activities. When a job is monotonous or chaotic, they're made out of control. So you can see here, 2 dimension is slightly different. Monotonous means day in, day out, all same, without change. Some people very easily get burnout and boredom as well, because do the same thing over and over again. And chaotic also not good. Chaotic means, you cannot control. That if you remember, I mentioned about loss of control, lack of control. So this is equal to chaotic as well. So you need a constant energy to remain focused, which can lead to fatigue and burnout again. Okay, so either way, monotonous or chaotic also not good. Another possible cause is lack of social support. Uh, your working colleagues, not really give good support. But I think the worst is, for example, workplace, you probably have some problem at work, but when you go home, no one also gives support toward you. You have conflict with people in the family as well. Your personal life, your friend also have problem. So in that case, you cannot rely support from workplace. You can expect from the personal life, from your friend, from your family. But if you don't have this also, this is make you more prone to become burnt out again. Okay, and of course, I already touched earlier, work-life balance, or in this case, work-life imbalance. So make sure your energy and your personal life, your good things in life, as I mentioned earlier, exercise, for example, you do regularly as well. If you don't do that, your work-life balance probably shifted. Secondly, I feel like as a student example here, probably you have to allocate your time as well, because sometimes you do your works, your assignment throughout the day. I think sometimes that's not so healthy, because you should have your own time to do your own personal thing. Okay, and again, sometimes you're too much on your social life, for example, with your friend. Um, and as a human, sometimes we need our own time, our protected time, with ourselves, or we can extend it to our family. But that should be divided, time with the family, time for yourself, time with a friend, time doing assignment, for example. This should be uh, divided appropriately. No, I mean, not everyone have, okay, only um, 12 hours for assignment. Not necessarily that way. It depends on your productivity and depend on your comfort as well. And outcome of burnout will result in job dissatisfaction. One of the things, as a student, you feel not satisfied with yourself, not satisfied with the achievement. Also, you feel you can give good commitment toward the organization where you are in. So if you students, for example, you cannot perform as what being expected or what you used to be. I think this is the issue about what you used to be. That means at certain time you used to achieve perhaps more than CGPA 3.5, but after second year, third year, it deteriorate, become 2.5 or something like that. So this must be something. The change actually is more important here, because of course sometimes we cannot expect everyone have similar academic achievement, because some people achieve more than the other. I mean, this is a fact of life anyway, because not everyone good at the same thing. So absenteeism is another issue. I mean, absenteeism, we're talking about sometimes, when you are too stressful, you frequently take MC absence, without informing, just simply not present, where you're supposed to be. Intention to leave the job as well, turnover. That means this is a working environment. If the workers in that particular organization at the particular office, keep changing, just imagine out of 10, um, 5 people resign and the 4 people come in. Then the second month also like 3-4 people resign. So this is what it means here. Turnover keep changing, that to might suggest something not right in that particular working environment. So if you remains in that particular environment, you work under burnout again. So lower productivity and impact quality of work. As burnout diminishes opportunity for positive experience at work. So when you have burnout, even the good things at work, probably you don't feel. I think I'm quite agree. If you leading to a burnout, usually the working environment is already not healthy. So if you are the only 1% feeling burnt out, but the rest not feeling so, that probably other factor just now. Your workload probably too high. If you remember, I'm talking about workload. I'm talking about fairness earlier. I'm talking about values, and I also talking about lack of control. So these other element perhaps not there. That's why you are the one feeling burnt out, but not your friend, for example. There must be something you have to look in that uh, perspective. And when you are burnt out, it gives negative impact on your colleagues. Both by causing greater personal conflict. Usually, when you have burnt out, it is easier or easily get sensitive in the organizations, and you're fighting among your working colleagues. So this is not healthy. And at the end of the day, what's your task for your job? You cannot perform effectively, and the target everything become non-achievable. And burnout can be contagious, meaning contagious here referring to like COVID lah. COVID, it can spread easily from one person to another. So burnout also can be like that. If one person burnout, other people can be feeling so, because like workload, for example, not only one person feeling workload, other people feeling the workload also increase. In the time of COVID, for example, we also noticed that many organizations cut number of their staff or their workers. So when workers is less, it become less people performing the job, and the nature of the job probably expanding, because last time before COVID, in the workplace, they have um, 10 people doing the job and divided among themselves between these 10 people. But during COVID, for example, it cut down, become 6-7 people only working. So the workload will increase. So if when you increase, everyone will feel increase. It will one person feel burnt out. Usually, other people also feel burnt out. Even though I said earlier, it could be only you or only one person feeling burnt out. It's possible, but usually it is contagious. That means it's like spreading the effect of burnout in that organizations. Then burnout increases in work environment characterized by interpersonal aggression. So if we are shouting to each other in the workplace, and express unhappiness among the workers, this will enhance the possibility for that organization, people who work there feeling burnt out, okay? And burnout should be considered as a characteristic of work group rather than as an individual syndrome. So we cannot assume this is one person only have burnout, but we have to look at the overall in the organization. And this is among the important thing when talking about burnout and its effect on health. It is complex relationship, but either way, poor health contribute to burnout, and also burnout contribute to poor health. So when you have burnout, you've been forced to work, you force yourself to perform against your will, against your what you call capability. So you will feel tense. Your blood pressure can increase if you I mean not necessarily old enough, but your blood pressure can increase. Your sugar control can go haywire, especially when you stress, you eat a lot. When you eat a lot, you lack of exercise to make it worse. So your sugar control, your what you call, you might be good. I mean your weight increase. This is prone to other diseases as well. And exhaustion is closely related to stress variable. Okay, and predictions to stress-related health outcome. Exhaustion is typically correlated with such stress symptom. This is important. So frequent headache, for example, chronic fatigue, gastrointestinal disorders, referring to your stomach feeling discomfort. You feel nauseated. You feel indigestions. For example, when you are eating, you feel stomach discomfort, muscle tensions, okay, hypertension. I mentioned blood pressure just now, cold or flu. This is another interesting thing when talking about risk for COVID. When you have burnt out and you become depressed, your risk to get COVID is there, because for example, when you stress always, your immune system go down. So when your immune system go down, you can get infection easily. You can get the simplest one, flu, cold, for example. But of course, it's prone for you to develop like contracting COVID from other people. Okay, and also sleep disturbances. This is another issue. When you burn out, when sleep disturbances, again, lack of sleep relate to obesity again. Lack of sleep also, someone who have physical problem like heart problem also can be affected. And more chronic, more related to above consequences. I mean, the longer it is, the more it will be related to all this. There are also association between burnout and substance abuse. We can see some kind of job prone to for people to abuse drug, because they need concentration. When they need concentration to sustain, because otherwise they feel burnt out, so they self-medicate with. I encounter some people self-medicate with methamphetamine, for example, shabu, stimulant drug. So this is not healthy. Just to sustain them at the work to prevent the burnout, they take all this medication and end up with the substance abuse. So this is some link between stress or burnout and the biological effect. So when you are burnt out, you feel stressed up. Your brain will release a lot of glutamate. Glutamate is another neurotransmitter. Okay, from science stream probably can understand a bit on glutamate, and CRF is a corticotrophin releasing factors, because if stress can induce this hormone cortisol through CRF. So cortisol is like our body when we feel being threatened, we've always been chronically not safe. Your body will prepare yourself in the natural way, to deal with this stress. So for example, they will release a lot of sugar, cortisol, okay? They will release other hormones, you know, that are preparing yourself to deal with the stress in long term. So this cortisol can have effect on your bodily symptom as well. And also stress result in BDNF decrease, the decrease of BDNF. BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophin factors, you know. So this is important in making what they call your brain cell increase in number, so you will be able to learn more, focus more. So it decreases the BDNF issue, stress in long term. So decrease the ability for you to focus on your job or your task. And of course, they also believe that all this also can lead to free radicals, which is damaging in nature to the brain, you know, like a toxin. So this is a relationship between stress, and it can cause insomnia, difficulty to sleep, and of course your desire, motivation to do work or to do your activities as student, for example, decrease because you feel tired, fatigued. Performance will decrease because you feel morale is low, you feel tired, so your poor performance and poor work, somebody will comment on you negatively, so it makes you more stressed. So again, this cycle will continue. So this is the one not so good when we talk about uh, the stress. You know, if you don't manage stress, you don't manage your burnout, this cycle will increase. You know, like make things worse for you. So how you going to detect you have burnout, for example? So, okay, whatever the cause, job burnout can affect your physical and mental health. Consider how to know if you have got job burnout and what you can do about it. First, have you become cynical or critical at work? So you become overtly sensitive, you become, you feel very negative about your work. So this is if you have experienced that, that's probably one of the signs you might have gone into burnout already in study, for example. Do you drag yourself to work and have trouble getting started? So you feel like, you know, always been delaying, you know, you hard to initiate your completing your assignment as a student. This is probably one of the signs, you know. You already go to the level of burnout. Have you become irritable or impatient with your friends, you know, your co-workers, or your if you're working, your clients, you know, your customer? And do you lack of energy to be consistently productive? So you feel like lack of energy, lack of desire. Uh, Remember, the fatigue is predominant when talking about burnout earlier. And do you find it hard to concentrate? So that means you cannot put your mind or your brain on the substance of you're supposed to do. And do you lack satisfaction from your achievement? This is another issue that might show sign of burnout. Do you feel disillusions about your job? So you like want to continue, want to stop. You feel like this work probably the employer not really show good appraisal always on your performance, so that probably make you feel disillusions about your work. And are you using drug or alcohol? This is already a negative things already, because if you use drug and alcohol to solve your stress, you feel ease your stress, this is a sign of requiring attention as soon as possible, because if you don't seek help after using drug, it will make you worse outcome, and become just we're afraid you become addicted if you keep on going taking drug to solve the problem. And have you sleep habit change? I mentioned earlier about insomnia. So your sleep habit is very important as an index whether you go to burnout or not. Are you troubled by an unexplained headache, stomach or bowel problem? So you look at here, burnout can lead to your not only psychological, now it become a physical symptom. For example, headache, stomach discomfort, bowel problems, all this already what they call the burnout already severe and already affecting your physical health. And the manifestation of burnout, first job satisfaction. Anomie here referring to feeling you've been treated unfairly, somebody not giving you what you're supposed to get. For example, if you perform work good, they should give bonus. You don't feel been given that, or some people receiving the bonus but some people doesn't. So that will also make probably feeling what we call enemy here. Then also job stress. Okay, you feel stress at job, anxiety, anger, depression, and some of combination of them. So looking at here is more on negative experience due to work. And burnout was not distinguishable from either job stress or depression. So sometimes it's overlap. That's why some people like to call burnout, but some people say job stress. To me, job stress, if you a student or like myself, we are lecturers, in the university, somehow we definitely feel stressed, to some extent. But whether you're able to cope with your stress, you're able to overcome the stress, that's another issue. When talking about burnout, it's an extreme form of stress already, not a mild form, because you might have a usual common stress, but it is mild in nature. But when it becomes severe, it becomes burnout. Of course, the worst scenario, depression. When talking about depression, later on we're talking about suicidal as well. So that's the risk. So sometimes we feel like we ourselves have our own target. So we want to self-satisfaction, what we call it narcissistic satisfaction. Narcissistic means it's about me, it's about myself, what I want to achieve. So sometimes we cannot achieve that because the working environment, and of course when we work, is a social interaction. Other people not necessarily working in the same manner with the same target, not necessarily in that way. So we cannot expect people to really follow our own satisfaction. Okay. We must be careful. Sometimes our expectation is we expect people. Expectation is sometimes not very good. So expectation people to follow our own way. So that's not the best way to do things. So this is some tips if you feel burnt out. First, you should adjust or change your working pattern. So this is important. So when you feel all the signs that I mentioned just now, for example, have a physical sign like burnout, stomach discomfort, frequent headache, feeling fatigue. So you should look at the working pattern and adjust your working pattern. Or perhaps you should work less at that particular time. You should, if you're a student, you study a bit less at that particular moment. and taking more breaks, that means frequent break off from your work, and avoiding overtime work. Okay, so limit the time, not in excess. Balancing work with the rest of one life, work-life balance, we already mentioned earlier. Then developing coping skill. Coping skill referring to what you mentioned here, cognitive restructuring, meaning sometimes someone give remarks to you, to this person, saying, um, uh, you need to improve your works. Okay, it's as simple as that. But this person who received this remark, uh, who been commented on that, feel like, oh, because he commented, he doesn't like me, or he doesn't want me to perform at work. That's why he keep criticizing me. So the issue is, we ourselves, every one of us, we have some cognitions, that automatically will come trigger our mind if something happen. So some people, they are overloaded with the negative cognition, meaning um, they are, we're talking about one of the things is overgeneralization, for example. Okay, even though someone give uh, remarks, not talking to this person, but this person feel like, oh, he he don't want to talk to me, he must be forgetting me, he must be um, going to leave me, the relationship, for example. So they overreact on the statement because they are cognitive error, we call it. So they are overgeneralize the situation. They make their own assumption most of the time. So this is not healthy. Because in life, I notice um, people have a tendency, to rather to make assumption, for example, or overgeneralize, as I mentioned, the way they are cognitively work on things that they are dealing, or if they have problem. Also about conflict resolutions. This is important. Again, because sometimes we resolve conflict, we try to resolve conflict, but when we're resolving it, it is a lot of anger, it is a lot of emotion, so it won't help. Some situations, I remember like last 2 weeks, when the daughter and the mother really not happy to each other, when they meet, they're like, always criticizing each other. So until I call them, um, I tell them, you cannot solve this way, because if you want to solve this problem in the way of hostility, emotions, overwhelm, you cannot find the right solutions. Because I think, like, I'm working as a psychiatrist looking at problem between daughter and mother, for example, just now. Of course, we are looking at how to solve that problem. Being a psychiatrist, just for your information, sometimes we don't have a magic solution, and we don't like to, what they call, put the our own solution. So we don't give, as a psychiatrist, oh, you should do A, B, C, D, E. No, we as a psychiatrist usually we don't do that, but we facilitate parties, meaning like just now I'm talking about mother and daughter. They should lay out their plan how to solve that problem. So it's not like we are give order for them, what need to do next. But of course, sometimes they agree. Oh, okay, we achieve compromise. I will do this ABCD. Okay, mother said, okay, I expect ABCD, and I will give you DEF, another item. So the compromise understanding is important. I think when we talk to someone or people who having problem, how they want to solve the problem and what they agree on to solve the problem, I think is important. So that I have to say, this is probably, as a psychiatrist, that's our role. So it's not our role to, okay, you should do A, B, C, D. We don't do that very much. I avoiding doing that because I don't want to be seen that problem, conflict resolution is by the doctor. It's better by the patient themselves. Definitely they have a solution. The only thing, sometimes when they're overwhelmingly emotional, angry, they cannot see the solution, obviously. Of course, at the point here about time management also important. Obtaining social support also important from friend. I already mentioned just now, if your colleagues not enough, then go to your friend, then friend and perhaps family members. But sometimes if you have conflict with the family, make it life more difficult at the end because no one have a support for you. So this is not healthy. And what else you can do here? Utilizing relaxation strategies. We're talking about relaxation technique, and also promoting good health and fitness, and developing a better self-understanding via self-analytic technique, counseling technique and therapy. Okay, I think I'm done with the first part. We're talking about burnout. So burnout can affect people, and it can lead to suicide. Okay, act of suicide. So suicide is important. It's a personal tragedy and has huge effect on the family, because a lot of stigma on suicide, and also uh, uh, the denial, family sometimes denial of the problem faced by their relative. So it is very difficult. In the world, they are estimated last year around 700,000 people died by suicide worldwide, to make it around 79 deaths per hour worldwide. So it is huge issue internationally. And also we can see during COVID time, the suicide rate among 15 to 29 years old is increasing, and worldwide we're talking about this is 4 leading cause of death. So if you remember, when I'm talking earlier about morbidity, about mental health become number one morbidity, meaning mental health cause disability, disable. But now I'm talking about death, mortality. So the fourth leading cause of mortality in this range of age. So basically, WHO want to reduce the suicide rate by 10% in 2020, and in the morbidity survey in Malaysia, showed that suicidal ideation presents around 6.4% among teenagers, and among young adults around 11%. So this is quite huge, high number. So then, what I'm talking about suicidal ideation, I think I should elaborate to you what it does mean. Because we're talking about suicidality, we're talking about three basic things when talking about suicidality. Someone who completed suicide, meaning already died. Okay, usually psychiatrists not involved in that person because that person already died anyway. Another category, those who already attempts. That means they already attempted to end their life with all the methods. So that's suicide attempt. And some suicide attempt, they already end up in ICU, have other problems, medical problem as a consequences of the attempts. So sometimes they don't mean to end their life for whatever reason they do it. But because of the attempt so serious, they end up in ICU. and even death. Okay, and that's attempt, suicide attempt. Another category when talking about suicidality is ideation, suicide ideation. So when you're thinking about life is not worth living, life is so challenging, so difficult, so this is what we call suicidal ideation. Some suicidal ideation we think about I hope I've died already. Okay, so without any plan. So that is considered like passive suicidal ideation. Some people when talking they have ideas but they already write a note, okay, like what we call suicide notes. They say goodbye everyone, even if old enough, they do a will, they leave a will already. This is about suicide, the recent newspaper publication. For example, for this year, 2020 up to January to June, there are 465 attempted suicide. Frankly speaking, it's not easy because suicide attempt, the doctor need to verify. Usually psychiatrists, suicide attempt, psychiatrists will verify. And the data not so easy to be collected because if some people they're not sent to be seen by psychiatrists, so they're not being captured. And you can see here, Malaysia recorded 468 suicide case from January to May. Okay, 2021. For 2020, 465. This is all during COVID times. And average 2 suicide a day in Malaysia. I think, frankly speaking, could be more. The issue here why it is lower than estimated because some family, the police classify as sudden death. Somebody fall from 30th floor, for example, they classify as sudden death. So it's not being captured as suicide. So that's why we miss that data. Accuracy of this data is important because the government, we need to prove to the government why we need to so-called do on mental health properly in our country, to really do effective intervention. So only by having data, for example, collecting the suicide rate properly, that's why now they're going to do, I've been asked recently, to talk on the, what they call suicide registry. Okay, so this is a way forward to recognize on the issue on suicide. You can see here a lot of news. I'm talking about young people, even who decided to take their own life. And the worst is, you can see here, moms kill kids and herself. So this is what we call suicide homicide. So homicide, suicide. That means they kill other people first, then they kill themselves. When usually the one who been killed, the one who less powerful lah, meaning kids, husband and wife, kill the wife and husband died by suicide. So this can happen. So this is the most tragic. Recently, you can see here 10 years old even decided to take their own life. Sometimes very hard to understand this because we always think that even to understand about life and death, 10 years old to understand that not easy, because they must face, in this case, this person might face hardship, difficult in life. Otherwise, usually 10 years old, they don't think about death. They don't understand about death. What does it mean, you know? So they to decide to take their own life, even very unlikely. I just want to share this information as well. I mean, good for you to know. You can see this is WHO report, you know, how our country reported to WHO. So the death rate in Malaysia from suicide were very strikingly here different, you know. For example, 2018 and below, like 5 over 100,000 people who committed suicide. But 2019 is already increased become 10. So like double. I think as I mentioned, our data on suicide not so reliable. That's why I think this is some improvement on data collection. Compared to other country, for example, among the highest, Australia, Korea, the rate of suicide among the highest in the world, they reach as much as 22, 25 per 100,000. So in 2019, like Malaysia, half of this rate. This is about the price of going to become a developed nation, you know. People become more stressed, you know, the suicidal behavior become more, what they call, more people will attempt, you know, of suicide. I already mentioned about this. So suicide begin with ideations, you know, the thinking to end their life. It involves planning to achieve the aim. So planning means, you know, some people, I have patient, they already buy rope, you know, rope, they want to tie them their neck. And family found, you know, where they are about, you know, like standing on the chair. That's happened. And in sometime we say this is impulsive, they are not meant, or then they don't means to end their life. They are out of frustration, they act on their what they call spurious behavior. They mean the behavior that suddenly arise at that time, impulsive behavior. However, data show that out of 20 people who attempt, one will have fatal outcome, means suicide. They die by suicide. Out of 20 attempts, one will die by suicide. So this is very important figure to be noted. The more silent the behavior of suicide, the higher the determination of the person. This is very clinical relevant. Sometimes patients seems, you know, outside they attempted suicide, come to the ward, their things seems to settle. They are very peaceful, you know. They say, I want to go back. We have cases when we discharge patient, they attempted again. You know why? Because in the ward, hospital ward, the stress all outside. When come to the ward, stress is no more there. So things seems to be all right. But when they go back home, they face back to the issue, the financial issue, the business issue, the interpersonal relationship issue. So that's why come to the word, everything seems to be okay. But what this statement means, more than that, those who really have strong desire, usually they don't reveal. They're not saying, because once they reveal, they could not proceed because people will be aware. So they keep it to themselves. So this is most frightening. That's why sometimes people sharing about suicide, I think for me that would be better rather than someone who keeps silent. I always remind to our doctors, you know, medical officer, the quiet person when talking about suicide, the more dangerous they are. Okay. Because those who say, I want to die, you know, goodbye to the world, this is my last message to everyone, it could be sign of attention rather than truly they want to end their life. Could be. I mean, I'm not saying you have to regard that way, but that could be the reason. So what is risk factor of suicide? Usually is a multifactorial. You cannot single out one. I can talk about, for example, male is higher risk, older age or too young age. If you notice just now, 15 to 24 years old, the higher rate of suicide also that should be take note. So age, sex, male, for example, someone who depressed, someone who drink alcohol, always drunk, those who no support, no family support, unemployed, all these put someone at a higher risk. Other than that, okay, I already touched from here. Previous suicide attempt, for example, also important suggestion or risk for the future attempt. Mental disorder like depression, harmful use of alcohol, job or financial loss. So this is another risk factor. At the individual level, feeling hopelessness, feeling no more hope, this is end of life, this is end of the world. So this is very important. That's why I always mention, someone say how to deal with someone's suicide. You should give some hope to them. Don't, like patients say hopeless, you say yeah, life is so miserable. Yes, you no more hope, you cannot find any solution. So that make people who actually in distress become worse. And the chronic pain, could be physical pain or emotional pain. Family history of suicide. Sometimes when we ask patients, they mention that their mother died from suicide, their father died from suicide. This is put the risk further. Of course, as usual, in medical, always been genetic and biological factor because of gene and so on also contribute to the risk of suicide.
Prof,
Then,
sorry,
ah,
sorry to interrupt. We have 5 minutes left.
okay, all right. So risk of suicide, relationship, sense of isolation and social support, and also relationship conflict and discord, meaning interpersonal issue. Beside that, this is the general community cause, which is, for example, during COVID, disaster or war, okay, economic issues, all this can cause risk factor as well. And discriminations also, and abuse, sexual abuse, child abuse during childhood. And this is the general what they call societal risk factor. Okay, access to means. For example, in the US, many people died by shooting because shotgun you can buy like in the 7-Eleven. Okay, and and this is sign of suicidality. Talking and thinking about death, that's good. Someone who share on that, at least we are aware they are feeling suicidal, depressed mode, death wishes, loss of interest, and hopelessness. I already mentioned just now, and preparing the things to a death. Okay, that's also important to be noted. This is what protects someone from suicidal. Strong personal relationship. Okay, that means support system is good. No conflict, individual conflict. Religious and spiritual belief also important. They are protecting factors as well. And lifestyle practice, positive coping strategies and well-being also important. Issues in Malaysia at the moment is criminalizing of suicide. We actually in the midst of decriminalizing suicide attempt. Now, who attempted suicide is considered a crime, a criminal. The data, also another issue. Stigma towards suicide and mental illness is also a problem, meaning, the stigma made people not seeking help because they're afraid of the label. Also homicide, suicide behavior. That means, as I mentioned just now, they kill someone else then they kill themselves. So, as a conclusion, suicide is preventable overall. If we deal with the mental illness, we modify that. It is preventable. Effective strategy is important as well in preventing suicide. Healthcare services need to incorporate suicide prevention as a core component. Okay, and community play important role in prevention suicide. Okay, so now I already completed the burnout and also on suicide. So I pass back to the chairperson. Thank you.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Prof. Dr. Muhsin atas ceramah yang penuh dengan ilmu pengetahuan dan pengajaran. Alhamdulillah banyak perkara baru yang telah saya peroleh dan saya yakin peserta kita pada malam ini juga beroleh daripada perkongsian sebentar tadi. Baiklah, sekarang kita akan memulakan sesi yang seterusnya iaitu sesi Q&A. Untuk pengetahuan semua, soalan diambil dari Google Form pendaftaran. Para hadirin juga boleh bertanyakan soalan di ruang chat box di Google Meet dan juga di ruang komen YouTube. Baiklah Prof, for the first question from Google Form. The question is it normal to feel sad out of a sudden? Sometimes I feel sad without any reason. Also, is it normal then that I tend to cry or scream when I'm really stressed?
I take note from the question just now, without reason. So I think it's with a reason, we always feel sad for some reason, you know, we lost someone, we lost relationship. Usually when talking about depression, we lost of something that value for us. So that's, of course, there are too many events, you know, one after another make you depressed and further, you know, that also not healthy. That probably also not a normal things need to be dealt with properly. But I think more significantly, if nothing happened, everything seems to be all right, everything, your family also not detecting any problem, someone else also not detecting any problem. I mean, the one close to you, they say everything fine, but you feel depressed for no reason. I think this is important to be addressed. So I guess if that circumstances, you can talk to someone when you feel depressed to really what they call to sometimes when we're depressed we cannot see the truthfulness of the situations, you know, so someone else can validate, especially the one who close to us. So talk to someone. But at the worst scenario, counselor, I mean, if you want to, I mean, some people reluctant to see psychiatrist, right? You can see psychiatrist if you wish. So at least to really evaluate, because we're talking about the more serious depression, they come with you know, like sleep problem, concentration problems, you know, feeling what they call, your talking also less, you know, your mind also not clear about things. So they come like as a group of things. So depressed single, only depressed without anything else, could be a response to something else. Okay, so I mentioned about few scenarios just now where it could be you having depression, so-called as a disease, as a disorder, okay, versus the normal. All right, that's my answer.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I think this question is quite important. I'm not considered to have any kind of depression or stress these days, but I often heard whispering and talk to hurt myself. And sometimes I almost hurt myself with sharp tools, especially scissors and knife. But I'm sure I'm not in my conscious state in this considered mental health, even though I didn't feel bothered with any problem.
This is the topic that we mentioned just now about suicidal ideations or acted to harm self. So I would say whatever the trigger, whatever the situation, whatever the mental health issue, but if you think you have the desire to harm yourself, or you already attempted something to harm yourself, you have to seek help. You have to I guess if you talk to someone, that's probably the first methods, but I think you need to seek professional help. You know why? Because uh, what we I found as well, uh, there's a tendency to have recurrence. You know, that means for another reason you will do the same thing. We cannot allow this cycle further as much as possible for your own self and for your loved one, you know. And usually when talking about suicide, sometimes even suicidal ideation, actually when you feeling suicidal or you feel so depressed, you feel like that's hopeless. You can't solve the problem, you know, at that moment. Whereas actually if you get to someone else outside, perhaps your family and so on, there's some list of solutions. Okay, so if you, of course, if you don't speak to someone about this suicide, that's the issue, because you cannot see the inside of the problem. So you need to talk to someone. Sometimes the solution is better, because if you think suicide is a permanent option, you know, if you harm yourself, you die, full stop. Your life is stopped at that moment. However, that solution is a possible. The only thing, when you depressed, when you so hit to this problem, you so hopeless, you feel that's it, you cannot do, because you're yourself already, you know, very depressed and cannot think further. Whereas if you talk to someone, there's a solution. So that's have to be mindful. Suicide is a permanent solution, unfortunately, but it is not the real solution of the problem. You should think other options as well. Okay.
Okay, Prof. This is from YouTube comment. I think it's related to the question just now. How to soothe someone you are not close to that is addicted to self-harm? How
Oh,
we, yes,
how
soothe the people
how to overcome someone not close to about self harm?
that is addicted to self-harm.
Yes, very difficult situation. Uh, I don't want to throw the word. It's not a common terminology. You say addicted to self harm. Okay. Uh, the issue is sometimes people have a certain type of personality. So the personality make you feel you are not loved, you have no emotional relationship with someone, you cannot engage the emotions, you know, when you in the interpersonal relationship, you feel rejected easily. So the only next thing, you think like you talk to this person, you feel rejected. This person, you feel like you're being abused. So like no support. So you will harm yourself. So that's personality will continue, carry on. So you hit difficulty, you see feel no support again, you harm yourself. So I think I just want to give some better insight rather than to say addicted to self harm. So that is why these people keep harming themselves. Of course, very challenging situation. We encounter not impossible person come to seek us 3-4 times a year, all because of self harm. 3 to 4 times a year. Just imagine, not easy to repeat over and over again. So, um, the among the top most solutions, uh, back to the usual rule, the support emotion is important. So, if we know someone like this, or someone is distressed, the basic rule should apply when we talk to someone under stress. So first, as a listener, you have to be active listener. Okay, we are psychiatrists, we're doing that. We have to listen. Like tonight, I'm do a lot of talking, but if the good listener, not much words, but listen attentively. But of course, when you listen, you have to show that you know the contents. You have to give reflections to the person who you listen to. Okay, that's the rule number one. So this is among the tip as well. Now, when you talk to someone under distress, secondly, you have to be empathy. So empathy means empathize with this person. I mean, like put yourself in the person's shoes. You know, the one who actually voiced the problem to you. So you have to imagine that way, because sometimes we have a tendency, more typical, what when we hear people problem, we look the problem from our own side as a listener. You know, where we say, I deal with that, I can't overcome that. That's small thing, you know, there's a many options. So you think this is show that empathy, basically no empathy. Empathy means you cannot think as what you are, but you should think like the person you listen to. You were under stress. Okay, so the empathy. Thirdly, it should be non-judgmental. So you cannot be you are wrong, you know, somebody distressed, somebody depressed, you say, yeah, you are actually, perhaps, you know, you go to neraka. Sometimes we use, I mean, I'm also Muslim, right? We sometimes we have that kind of remark. We say ini sebab banyak dosa. Okay, so orang tu lah depressed, kita kata dia banyak dosa lagi, bukan word of hopes, that's the word of negative to that person. So that kind of remark we should change lah, we should avoid. I mean, sometimes listen would be better if you don't know what to express. But not to express, I think at least you should reflect. Oh, this is so tough. This is so difficult for you to handle. I know this, if many people probably as stressed as you as well, if you're in the same situation. That person will feel like we acknowledge her or his stress, okay, his thought. At least not he himself alone who suffer from this. I mean, at least the stress, someone who absorb the stress as well. So that's rule when you talk to someone should be there, especially someone who is stressed. Usually this is like for psychiatrists, counselors, so that's the basic rule. But for psychiatrists, every day I'm doing that with the patient. So we take for granted, but easy to say for those who are not really in that field, if not counselor, or I mean, should be listening in this way. So it's helpful for people, not insulting another people, okay, by doing that as well. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I think it will be the last question.
Okay.
From Google Form also. How can we avoid feeling guilty whenever we are resting or trying to take care of ourselves? The guilty is unavoidable, or in easy word, how to stop overthinking every time.
I can see two things here, the question. First about guilty, secondly about overthinking. Okay, so guilty, when we depressed, one of the features of depression is excessive guilt. We see guilt too much from the actual. So if you keep repeating thinking about guilt to yourself, perhaps if you talk to your close friend or relative, they say, yeah, everything is okay, not so, I mean, not your fault, you know, you feel like that person feel that way. It might be that person who actually feeling excessive guilt have that problem over and over again, okay, about the guilt. So first, probably features that need further understanding whether this is the part of the depression or not. This person might have some form of depressed mode. So depressed mode could be low motivation. I mean, the milder form of depression, not necessarily sleep per se, the problem. But usually, I found that some people, the lack of motivation, they feel like very hard to go to class. I'm talking about in the context of students. They feel like no desire to meet friends. All this. So it's not hard fast rule that sleep must be disturbed or appetite must be disturbed. Of course, with that, that's more serious. But without that, it doesn't mean. So it could be guilt also another issue just now, that contributing to that. But after all, if you really bothered by the guilt feeling, you should write it down. I'm feeling guilty. For what? So you list whatever the possible. Sometimes what we are thinking when we put in writing is it's like not much actually my fault, not much about things. So we will realize. In fact, if people keep obsessed about guilt, I would say compare between what good things you have done, what guilt that you have already what they call commit. Okay, so you perhaps most of the time, unless you really murder someone, you already hit someone. That's different story lah. That's guilt by itself, right? But most of the people feeling guilt because of the emotion, you will find that the positive aspect of yourself is more than the negative. Usually, when we do cognitive therapy to people, okay, so put it down. So about what they call overthinking. Usually overthinking, usually when we are stressed, we have this overthinking about something. So I think train ourselves uh, to, for example, to focus what actually we are dealing with. Okay, They use the word mindful. So mindful meaning that if you're overthinking, uh, uh, you see a tree outside your house. You focus on the tree. The tree got leaf, the winds blowing the tree, something like that. So you distract yourself from the overthinking to the matters in front of your eyes, the real thing happening to you. In fact, some people, they focus on themselves, they bring awareness, being aware about, for example, the shoes. The shoes is red shoes. The sole is white color. For example, distract yourself. You have to learn. This is I'm talking about mindfulness for those who keep on overthinking. But sometimes to have overthinking could be normal, as long you can sleep, that happen for 1 hour overthinking about something, which subject I want to take, for example, this semester. Of course, you need to think about that, not over one time. So it's a rational to think for a period of time to make that decision. Again, I have to say, you keep on overthinking, but you cannot make decisions. For example, I give example here. So we call it indecisive. You cannot make decision, and then you low motivations, and then you avoiding meeting friend, as I mentioned earlier. So this is pointing again could be depression. Okay, so I hope I can give you can take that understanding. Distinguishing between it could be a normal thing, it could be part of something more serious about depression, for example, or anxiety. Okay, the long answer for short questions.
Okay. Just to inform you, Prof, now we have about 200 in our live at YouTube.
Very good. Congratulations to the organizer.
Yes, thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
Baiklah, nampaknya masa amat mencemburui kita. Oleh itu, tamatlah sesi Q&A kita pada malam ini. Saya ingin mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih buat Prof. Dr. Muhsin yang telah berbesar hati memberikan ceramah yang cukup bermanfaat pada malam ini. Semoga dengan ilmu yang telah kita peroleh malam ini dapat kita amalkan di mana sahaja kita berada. Di sini saya ingin selitkan sebuah hadis daripada Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu. Rasulullah SAW bersabda, maksudnya barang siapa yang menempuh satu jalan untuk menuntut ilmu, maka Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala akan memudahkan baginya jalan untuk ke syurga. Semoga usaha kita untuk menuntut ilmu pada malam ini dapat membantu kita menuju ke syurga Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala, insya-Allah. Baiklah hadirin sekalian, diingatkan kepada semua untuk kekal bersama kami kerana sesi seterusnya ialah sesi kuis di Kahoot. Sesi yang sangat dinanti-nantikan kita semua. Hadiah berbentuk wang tunai disediakan buat 5 pemenang teratas. Baiklah, untuk makluman semua yang akan menyertai kuis, sila tekan link yang telah kami hantar di ruangan komen. Peserta diminta untuk meletakkan nombor matrik sahaja. Bila kita beri masa untuk peserta kita masuk. Baiklah, sekarang jam menunjukkan 10.53. Kita beri lagi 2 minit untuk para peserta masuk di dalam link kuis Kahoot kita.
Okey, dalam ramai tu kita boleh mula Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mula. Soalan. Mantap soalan. Yakin je sama dekat laju ni. Tak sikit
Okay, next. Question number 2, which mental illness is defined as a mood disorder causing mood to swing from an extreme high to an extreme low? Okay, cepat. Tadi depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder and mood swing. Laju betul jawab ni. Alright, so the answer is bipolar disorder.
Yakin je sebelum skizofrenia. Apa benda tu? Okey, soalan seterusnya. Ini penerangan ni lah. Bipolar disorder is will cause mood to swing from an extreme high to an extreme low. It also known as manic depression.
Suicide rate in Malaysia during COVID-19 pandemic. Ni tadi Prof ada terangkan juga. So kita tengok siapa yang fokus lah. 94 cases a month during this pandemic in Malaysia. Okay, next question. 2118. Okay, so explanation ni, the COVID-19 pandemic has had negative effects on the mental health of citizens of Malaysia. Suicide cases almost doubled on average across all age group in the 5 months in 2021. Jadi kita kena alert lah. Okay, next. Which gender is more likely to die from committing suicide?
Ni Prof terangkan lah.
Alright, man. Dia macam terkejut jugalah. Tapi that's the fact. Okay, next question. Okay. Next question. When is the World Mental Health Day of 2021? Cepat. World Mental Health Day. 10th of October. Oh, okay. 10 Oktober. Okay, next. Which is the right way to release stress? Call a friend, meditate, laugh it off, all of the above. Biasa kalau kita nak release stress kita buat apa? Alright, all of the above. Kita call a friend, laugh it off and meditate. 211786 masih bertahan bagus. There are many ways one can relax and release stress. Most of them will cause them to calm down and feel relaxed as quickly as possible. Banyak cara untuk kita release stress. Okay, next question number 11. What are the symptoms of burnout? Ni pun tadi Prof ada terangkan juga. Alright. Okay, cepat. 79, 80, 81, 80. Laju. Lagi. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright. The answer is feelings of energy, depletion and loss of motivation. Itu boleh causes of burnout. 786 yang bertahan 786 Siapa 786 ni? Apa? Organizing team ke? Burnout is a state of emotional, physical and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It occurs when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally drained and unable to meet constant demands. You will also lose interest and motivation. So itulah ada burnout. Okay, next question. What are the causes of burnout? Working too much and that's all of the above ni. Nampak macam semua berkait je ni kan. Oh, okay, betul. Alright, next question.
Wih, masih bertahan.
Masih bertahan 786. Ada dah apa slide ni dah leak awal ke? Mungkin dia dah study dulu ke? Risau Right. Factors contributes to burnout, including your lifestyle and personality traits. What you do in your downtime and how you look at the world can play just as big of a role in causing overwhelming stress like work demands. Banyaklah benda dalam hidup kita boleh sebabkan kita punya burnout. Okay, next question. Question 15. Okay, kita dah nak habis lah question ni. Is burnout the same as stress? Burnout, stress. Sama kan? Macam sama je kan? Cik, tak tahulah kan. No but yes. Ush. Ini wow. No but yes. Yes but no. Don't know. 80 90. Oh, tak semua jawab Alright. No, yes but no, no but yes. Alright. Okay, so ni explanation dia, burnout may be the result of unrelenting stress, but it isn't the same as too much stress. So dia macam sama, tapi tak sangat sama. Dia macam tu lah dia. Okay, next question. Question number 17. What is the symptom of having suicidal ideation? Cepat. 3, 2, 1. Alright, all the above. Okay, engaging in risky behavior, talking about being burden to other and isolating themselves. Jadi kita kena take note lagi. Alright, 786 sudah kita meletakkan takhta dia diberi pada 210668. So, apa tadi? Burnout ni kan suicidal ideation is a significant number of people with suicide ideation keep their thoughts and feelings a secret and show no sign that anything is wrong. These symptoms are quite common if used nowadays. Macam tiap pemuda-pemuda zaman sekarang ni, bila dia orang sedih dia tak luahkan. They keep as a secret. Okay, so bahayalah. Dia simpan je, dia tak express themselves. So kalau kita ada rasa sedih ke apa, we must show sebab kita tak nak lah kita sampai satu masa kita detik the suicidal thought tu. Alright, next question. Question 19, kita ada lagi 4 soalan. What is the cause of suicidal thoughts? Poor diet, history of violence or abuse, feeling of hopelessness, perfectionistic tendencies. Biasa tak tahulah kalian macam mana? 86, 87. 3, 2, 1. Alright, 92 orang yang jawab Jawab. Okay, dari 2. History of violence or abuse and feeling of hopelessness. Banyak orang yang ada suicidal thoughts ni sebab ada dua perkara tu lah. Jadi bahaya lah juga. Okay, Alia masih di tempat pertama. Next. Kita tengok explanation dia. Suicide ideation can occur when a person feels that they are no longer able to cope with an overwhelming situation. This could stem from financial problems like the death of a loved one, and the end of a relationship or a debilitating illness or health. Okay, next question. How to not reduce the risk of suicidal thoughts? Eat a balanced diet. So jawapan ni lah, keeping knives or potentially harmful substance within easy reach. Next question. Oh, Alia masih di tempat pertama, okay? Okay, the last question. Poor mental health increase the risk for long-lasting physical conditions like... Tadi 4, mana satu jawab betul? All of the above ke? Okay, all of the above. Banyak tricky question malam ni Okay, all of the above. Okay, so kita tengok pada kita tempat ketiga. Dengan markah 6990215026, tempat kedua 213463 dan tempat pertama kita ada 210668 Alia. Okay, congratulations semua. Okay, so run out. Okay, tengok dulu list top 5 untuk kita. Inilah. Kita tengok view full report.
Sabar ya, kita nak slow sikit.
Okay, tak apa. Kita memahami jangan risau. Alright, so untuk quiz kita pada malam ini, mental health awareness quiz, kita ada 214 player. Alhamdulillah 214. And then top 5 kita mulakan dengan tempat kelima. Kita ada 213667. Tempat keempat 212807. Tempat ketiga 215026. Tempat kedua 213463 dan tempat pertama 210668 Alia. Dia siap bagi tahu lagi. Dia siap bagi tahu nama Alia. Supaya dia macam kalau ada orang nombor sama tak saya yang Alia tu. Dia bagi tahu awal. Okay, so top 5 ni boleh claim hadiah pada siapa ya, Adam?
Pada Sumayyah.
Okay.
Nanti saya bagi nombor.
Okay, so 5 top 5 ni nanti boleh contact Adam ataupun boleh je contact nama PIC dekat poster kita. Nanti saya akan bagi nombor, nanti saya akan forward nombor anda pada bendahari untuk kita buat further action. So tahniah semua yang dah jawab, yang tak menang ke yang menang ke sama je, tahniah semua. Alhamdulillah kita selesai jawab quiz pada malam ni. Banyak kita orang kata nampaklah kan betapa fokusnya mereka yang 5 ni berada setia daripada awal sampai habis. Sampai jawab pun nampak 85% nombor 1. Kira bagus, Alhamdulillah. Dan yang tak dapat tempat 5 hingga 1, jangan risau. Kita akan ada banyak lagi program lepas ni. Pastikan anda stay tune, okay? Okay, itu saja untuk quiz. Terima kasih.
Wah, tahniah buat semua pemenang dan tahniah juga diucapkan buat semua peserta yang turut serta memeriahkan sesi kita pada malam ini. Baiklah, untuk makluman pemenang, sekali lagi anda dikehendaki untuk menuntut hadiah anda daripada saudari Tuan Nur Sumayyah. Sila hubungi atau chat dalam keadaan segera pada nombor yang tertera di ruangan komen. Jadi dengan berakhirnya sesi kuis sebentar tadi, maka berakhirlah majlis ilmu kita pada malam ini. Baiklah, buat para hadirin sekalian, jangan lupa untuk isi link kehadiran yang akan diletakkan di chat box ataupun ruangan komen di YouTube Live. Bagi menutup majlis kita pada malam ini, marilah sama-sama kita membacakan doa Rabitah.
Okay, untuk yang berada dalam Google Meet, kita ambil gambar lepas doa Rabitah. Okay, boleh kita baca doa Rabitah dulu. Ke kita nak bagi masa untuk isi Google Form dulu?
Rasanya boleh proceed dengan doa Rabitah dulu.
Okay, baik.
Nanti diorang akan sambil isilah. Alright. Jangan lupa isi semua.
Okay, ini bukan doa Rabitah ya. Ini iklan. YouTube yang free je. Okay.
Oh ya.
Ya, ada kenapa tu? Okay. Sedia semua, tanda tangan. Bismillah.
اللهم إنك تعلم أن هذه القلوب قد اجتمعت على محبتك والتقت على طاعتك وتوحدت على دعوتك وتعاهدت على نصرة شريعتك فوثق اللهم رابطاتها وأدم ودها واهدها سبلها واملأها بنورك الذي لا يخبو واشرح صدورها بفيض الإيمان بك. Ya Allah, Engkau mengetahui hati-hati ini telah berkumpul kerana kasihkan-Mu, bertemu dan patuh padamu, bersatu memikul dakwa-Mu. Hati-hati ini telah berjanji setia, mendaulat dan menyokong syariat-Mu, maka eratkanlah akan ikatannya. Kekalkan kemesraan hati ini, tunjukkan ia jalan yang sebenar. Limpahkan dengan cahaya Rabbani-Mu yang tak pernah padam, dan lapangkan dengan iman. Allahumma in.
Amin amin ya rabbal alamin.
Hai.
Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. Sebelum itu diingatkan kepada mereka yang berada di Google Meet untuk kekal bersama kami bagi sesi fotografi. Bagi mereka yang menonton di YouTube, kami mengalu-alukan anda untuk join Google Meet dan bergambar bersama kami. Sekarang tibalah masa untuk sesi fotografi. Saya ingin mengajak mereka yang berada di Google Meet untuk buka kamera dan bergambar bersama-sama kami.
Jom semua, mana-mana yang ada kamera yang lawa-lawa tu, jom kita ambil gambar kenangan. Gitu.
Buka kamera semua.
Okay. Dah ni. Ada lagi? Kita tunggu lagi. Mana yang belum buka ke? Jom kita buka kamera. Okay. Okay lah ni. Boleh ni. Sekejap. Alright. Lalu. 1, 2, 3. Okay, saya kira 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Senyum. Alright. Sekali lagi. 1, 2, 3. Okay, gaya bebas. Cik. Okay, freestyle. 1, 2, 3. Okay, terima kasih semua.
Baiklah. Untuk reminder, buat pemilik nombor matrik 210150, yang ni untuk tempat kelima untuk kuis tadi. Baiklah, dengan berakhirnya sesi fotografi kita sebentar tadi, maka berakhirlah majlis kita pada hari ini. Saya Nifatin Hazira selaku moderator anda pada hari ini ingin memohon maaf sekiranya terdapat sebarang kekurangan dan kesilapan sepanjang saya mengendalikan majlis pada hari ini. Kita akhiri majlis pada malam ini dengan tasbih kifarah dan surah Al-As. Dengan ini majlis disudahi dengan lafaz yang mulia. Wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. PKPIM hidup biar berjasa. Terima kasih semua, jumpa lagi.
Bye.
Bye, thank you semua.
Thank you.
Jangan lupa isi link kehadiran semua.
Thank you.
Bye.
Awak, thank you.
Terima kasih semua. Terbaik.
Dah habis kan?
Tunggu orang isi Google Form kot. Ramai lagi dekat
Ramai
YouTube
je.
live ni.